Radio, United Kingdom.
Till the end of time.
In 1945, times were tough. Money was tight. The country was bankrupt after 5.5 years of war. The nation needed cheering up. We wanted something to make us smile, and the BBC rose to the challenge. Just 3 months after the colourful VE Day celebrations, the BBC shifted from its wartime role and launched a new radio station. It was called the BBC Light Programme.
Good morning, everyone. This is the BBC Light Programme on wavelengths of 1,500 and 261 metres. It's the first time we've said those words, BBC Light Programme, which we hope are going to mean for you now and in the days to come all that is best in radio entertainment from 9 o'clock in the morning to midnight.
I'm David Hamilton, probably the only person still on the radio today who presented programmes on the BBC Light programme. I was there just as the channel started to modernise, but my first memories of the station were as a listener in the 1940s. Few homes had television in those days, ours certainly didn't, so we looked to radio for entertainment. Growing up on a remote farm in Sussex, the wireless, as we called it then, was my window to the world. The radio in our kitchen had a dial on the front with faraway stations like Luxembourg and Hilversum on it. During the war, radios had been tuned to the BBC Home Service with its news and discussion, plus some entertainment programmes.
This is the BBC Home Service.
Then boosted by the arrival of the BBC's Forces programme, aimed at those overseas and here at home. Within weeks of the end of the war in Europe, the BBC Forces programme became the BBC Light programme, the entertainment station which would serve us right through until the swinging 60s.
This is the BBC Light programme.
The BBC yearbook said the Light would appeal not so much to a certain class of listener, but to all listeners when they were in certain moods, but not everything would be frothy or frivolous. It also noted that the necessary reorganisation of wavelengths to deliver the service bewildered many listeners. With no TV to gather around, it was the radio we stared at for light entertainment. The BBC Light programme brought us the wonderful variety shows of the day like Itmar, It's That Man Again, featuring Liverpool comedian Tommy Handley.
All we know is that we're happy to welcome That Man Again.
Raise a Laugh with Lancashire comedian Ted Ray.
Thank you, boys and girls. I went down to Ascot last week. I walked back.
Take It From Here, written by a young Frank Muir and Dennis Norden and starring Jimmy Edwards and June Whitfield.
Because, Mr. Glum, if it is just money, we no longer accept that as sufficient objection. We'll manage somehow. Love will find a way.
Eyewash!
And much Binding in the Marsh, set in a fictional RAF station.
How do you do, visitors? Welcome once again to Much Binding in the Marsh. During the recent fine weather, we've been getting busy gardening and tidying up the grounds. We've been over the tennis court with a scythe, and it's a great improvement.
All the comedians had catchphrases. We waited to hear them and fell about when we did. There was Arthur Askey.
Hello, playmates.
Rob Wilton.
The day war broke out, my missus looked at me and she said...
and, of course, Mrs. Mop.
Can I do your nails, sir?
At Christmas time, as our family gathered, I used to do impressions like this. What's on the table, Mabel? Or, give in the money, Barney. Did you get it? Of course. It was Wilfred Pickles on Have a Go, a quiz show that he hosted with his wife, Mabel.
And that brings our first personality to the microphone, and she's a very charming lady with nice grey hair and a very nice grey frock. It's very nice to have you here. Yes. Will you tell me your name?
Mrs. Florence Holt.
Mrs. Florence?
Yes.
Have a go, Flo.
But alongside the laughter, there was work to be done, and at lunchtime, 3 days a week, came Workers' Playtime, a leftover from the war years with variety from a factory canteen somewhere in Britain.
Workers' Playtime comes today from a canteen in Cosham near Portsmouth and is recorded. We start today's program with a girl who is really hitting the highlights these days. She's beautiful, she's funny, and she's so blonde that I wish I was a gentleman. Well, here she is, Beryl Reid.
Hello, everybody. It's lovely to be here, but I do hope you'll excuse me looking a little worried this morning, because, you see, my mother's not very well. Well, this morning she swallowed an egg whole, and she's afraid to move about in case she breaks it, and she's afraid to sit down in case she hatches it.
And staying with industry, in the morning there was Music While You Work, half an hour of non-stop music featuring bands like Troyes and his Bandoliers.
Music While You Work is played this morning by Troyes and his Bandoliers.
The familiar strains to Music While You Work. The instruction to program producers was clear. The music played had to be cheerful and rhythmically steady to maintain a brisk working pace. But sudden change in tempo or dynamics were to be avoided, as it might break workers' concentration. And there was recreation too. Victor Sylvester taught us how to dance on the radio with his slow, slow, quick, quick, slow. And there were the Latin rhythms of Edmundo Ross. At the weekend, I would sit by my radio savouring every second of the wonderful football commentaries. Living on my grandparents' remote farm, where all I saw were cows and sheep and a few pigs, I wondered what it would be like to be among huge crowds that I could hear at places like White Hart Lane and St James's Park. Raymond Glendenning brought the action to me. With his words and the way that he said them, the pauses and the drama, he painted pictures and brought the action into our living rooms. You were on the edge of your seat, hoping that your team would win.
Referee shakes hands with the two captains. Harris, the Chelsea captain, tosses the coin. Who wins the toss? It's Chelsea, and they're going to play with the advantage of the sun mainly behind their backs. Now here are the crowd waiting for the goal. Lining up in that centre circle are the three Bolton inside forwards, Lofthouse the centre forward, Hunt away on his far side, and Barris.
Well, he made you feel as though you were there. Ace commentator Raymond Glendenning. He commentated on boxing, horse racing, Wimbledon tennis and greyhound racing too. A real all-rounder.
Fights him off the left hand. Robertson comes in, trying to get that right hand in. Turpin gets in at close quarters. Now they're building on the ropes just above us here.
Raymond was one of my early broadcasting heroes. In later times, I would dash home from the match on a Saturday afternoon to catch all the day's results on Sports Report with its stirring theme at 5 o'clock. Listening into Sports Report, I never dreamed that the first thing I would do on radio would be to read the football results on the British Forces Network in Germany in 1959. There was much live music performance on the BBC Light programme, but there were some gramophone records too. The big record show on the BBC Light programme was Family Favourites, a link-up between the forces abroad and the folks back home. It was transmitted at 1 o'clock on Sundays, and it was said to be the only radio show with its own smell. When you heard the programme's theme tune at Sunday lunchtime, you could smell the roast beef and Yorkshire pudding that was sizzling in millions of homes around the country.
In Britain and in Germany, it's 12 noon. So at home and away, once again, it's time for two-way family favourites.
Andrei Kostelanets and his orchestra with A Song in My Heart, the theme of family favourites. In those days, of course, we'd have to write in for a mention, and the BBC received thousands of messages from hopeful listeners. There was a mailroom at the BBC packed with huge sacks of letters and postcards. The ladies who ran it would sort them out and deliver them to the appropriate producer's office. They would pass relevant ones on to the presenter. The programme itself created a radio romance when two of the presenters fell in love with each other's voices and eventually married. They were Cliff Mitchellmore in Cologne and Gene Metcalfe in London. To think his chat-up line was, "What's the weather like in London, Gene?"
Hello, everyone. Well, came the dawn this morning, and to borrow the title of one of the records to follow shortly, down came the rain. Inches deep all over the roads, grey and nasty and perfectly foul. So we won't dwell on that.
How magical was it for me to sit in the same studio in Cologne in 1959 and broadcast for the first time on the British Forces Network in Germany. What a time to be on the radio. Young pop stars like an 18-year-old Cliff and Connie Francis came out to see us to get their records played on BFM. They recognised the huge importance of radio and a play on family favourites with its enormous audience almost guaranteed a hit.
Hello, Dave.
Cliff, how long have you been in show business now?
Just about a year and a month.
Mm-hmm. And how did you first get the idea of a singing career?
Well, as far as I've ever wanted to be anything, I've always wanted to be a singer. And as usual, I got our local group together and we did spots here and there. And in the end, we decided we wanted to beat so hard that we did finally make it.
Immediately after Family Favourites on a Sunday, it was the Billy Cotton Band Show. An early home for some jokes by a young Michael Palin.
Wakey, wake!
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
The Billy Cotton Band Show that lit up Sunday afternoons on the Light programme. There was drama too on the channel, and it captivated a generation. We enjoyed Dick Barton, Special Agent. Dick Barton, the super sleuth, with his pals Jock and Snowy.
Dick Barton, Special Agent.
Who broke Nelson's column over my head?
Hello, Mr. Barton. Unfortunately, we haven't time to play games just now.
Some other time, maybe.
I think not, Mr. Barton. You have played your last game.
Oh, blimey. Haven't we heard that remark before, sir?
Gripping stuff. Noel Johnson as Dick Barton's Special Agent, solving the crimes and the post-war years on the Light programme. Great boyhood listening for thousands of boys like me. Then there was The Daring Dexters, a drama about circus folk with budding actors including Michael Hordern. Daring Dexters having fun on the high wires.
Boom Radio. The story of the BBC Light programme with David Hamilton.
One of the most fondly remembered dramas was Mrs. Dale's Diary, probably the BBC's first proper serial. It featured Mary Dale, a doctor's wife in suburban London, who was always famously concerned about her husband.
Mrs. Dale's Diary, a recording of the daily happenings in the life of a doctor's wife.
I've been very lazy over the weekend and haven't made a single entry in my diary since Friday. So now I'll have to try and cover 4 days at once. On Saturday, Sally called in on her way to the shop to pick up Mother. She'd had a letter from Trevor that morning, written at the end of his first day in the army.
Oh, I'm so happy. First Gwen's engagement, now this, and so much else to look forward to.
Yes. And to look forward to together, baby.
Jim, I've just thought, are you sure it's all right, our going off to goodness knows where? I mean, from your health point of view.
Rather like Emmerdale Farm on TV later becoming just Emmerdale, Mrs. Dale's Diary was later modernised to become simply The Dales, before eventually being axed and replaced by the hip and happening Wagoner's Walk. A little less hip and happening was Housewife's Choice, based on a similar programme on Swedish radio.
Now for someone who never misses a programme. Mrs. Forsyth of 57 Queen Street, Invergordon, Rochester. Your niece, Mrs. Joan Smith of 11 Rissington Road, Gloucester, sends you this greeting, Mrs. Forsyth. And although Stephen is only 2, he should have a little mention, I think. Love Me Again is the record we're playing for you, as recorded by Petula Clark.
Housewife's Choice. It began in 1948 and it was to be the first home for my inspiration and good friend Pete Murray, who'd already made his name on Radio Luxembourg. He went on to host Pete's Party at the weekend, originally described as a get-together round the gramophone to play his choice of records and some of your requests. Big stars dropped in to chat too, so it was a forerunner of his open house series on Radio 2.
And a very good evening to you, ladies and gents. We have a swinging program lined up for you. This is Pete Murray at the helm, behind the microphone, and we'll be introducing you to some guests a little later on in the show. But, of course, we also have some superb music.
Some shows created then for the Light programme remain to this day. Woman's Hour began on the BBC Light programme in 1946, hosted originally by a bloke, Alan Ivany. He was a specialist in writing for and talking to women, according to the Radio Times. The first edition featured a talk on the adoption of babies and another on fashions. Just before Woman's Hour came the programme for mothers and children at home. Listen with Mother.
Are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin.
It was full of captivating stories, songs and nursery rhymes for a generation sitting cross-legged on the lounge carpet.
It's 1:45. This is the BBC Light programme for mothers and children at home. Are you ready for the music? It's different today. When it stops, Eileen Brown will be here to speak to you.
Good afternoon. Did you like that tune?
And for the slightly older, there was a Saturday treat.
9 o'clock on Saturday morning means Children's Favourites, introduced today by Derek McCullough, Uncle Mac.
The programme featured trusted children's anthems at the request of us young letter writers, from Nellie the Elephant to I'm a Pink Toothbrush and I know an old lady who swallowed a fly.
Hello, children everywhere. This is Uncle Mac. Good morning to you all.
Well, another mixed bag, and I hope a few requests that I don't recall having included before. If you're settled down and ready, so am I. Let's begin with a gay one sung by Alma Cogan. This is for Alan Whitaker and his brothers Gimme and Andrew, 53 3rd Avenue, Weddingborough, Northamptonshire. Also a very keen, patient young listener named of Michael Droney, who's 8, 12 Glebe Path, Mitcham, Surrey.
The theme to children's favourites, Puffin Billy by Edward White, a melody which really does evoke a time and place in our lives. The programme emerged from Children's Choice as 1954 began. Another programme from the BBC Light, which has entertained us to this day, is Pick Up the Pops. It began in 1955 and subsequently its presenter Alan Dell introduced a run through the music charts as listed in various music papers. The programme was later hosted by David Jacobs until 1961 when a 34-year-old Australian took over the show, trying desperately to sound as English as he could. Not off.
Before we do spin those top 3 discs of the day, let's meet the man who'll be in charge of Pick Up the Pops as of next week, Alan Freeman. All right, Fluffy?
Hi, David.
Tell me just what's going to happen next week.
Well, next week in Pick Up the Pops, we're going to have 3 20-minute segments. In the first 2 segments of 20 minutes, we're going to present the new discs, the new releases. I hope I have the same wisdom as you in picking them. And from 11:20, all the current Top 20 hit paraders.
Alan Fluff Freeman, who was later to truly command the chart show format with his legendary weekly rundowns of what in those days we called the Hit Parade.
Not bad for the first number 1, is it? 7 weeks and still at number 1 is Frank Ifield's I Remember You. And up that top 10 once again we find number 10, Ballad of Paladin from Duane Eddy. Number 9, Once Upon a Dream from Billy Fury. Number 8, Breaking Up Is Hard to Do from Neil Sedaka. Number 7, Guitar Tango from The Shadows. Number 6, She's Not You from Elvis Presley. Number 5, Sealed with a Kiss from Brian Hyland. No number 4, 2 number 3s. Roses Are Red from Ronnie Carroll. Speedy Gonzales from Pat Boone. Number 2, Things from Bobby Darin. And number 1, I Remember You from Frank Ifield. Poor Bobby Darin, sitting there patiently at number 2, and below comes Elvis full of running, and above a still firmly cemented Frank Ifield. Well, next Sunday at 4 in Pick of the Pops. Next Sunday, all right? Right. Stay bright.
Pick of the Pops is presented by Alan Freeman.
At the Sign of the Swinging Cymbal by its composer Brian Fay and his orchestra. A newer version was recorded too by Brass Incorporated. Many future stars began their careers on radio. Petula Clark's radio debut came at the age of 9 on the BBC Empire service. On the Light programme, Petula would star in Calling All Forces before enjoying her first chart hit in 1954.
In the shoemaker's shop, this refrain would never stop as he tapped away, working all the day. At his bench there was he, just as busy as a bee, little time to lose with the boots and shoes, but his heart went...
The Young Beatles also found their way onto the Light programme in their early days. They appeared on Saturday Club on 10 occasions, the first just weeks after the release of Please Please Me. Saturday Club was a hugely important programme for a new generation of listeners. For many years, it was a rare opportunity to hear pop music. It began life in 1957 as Saturday Skiffle Club, and Brian Matthew was its regular host.
And so to our LP spots. Now this week we feature a very special album. Next Saturday, Cliff Richard will be 21. He'll also be setting off for Australia, but he'll leave behind an album called 21 Today. Here's one of the tracks from it with Cliff and the Shadows.
I'm gonna give you 40 days.
Saturday Club with Brian Matthew. Another true landmark show on the BBC Light programme, as it was on the Home service, was the Subversive Goon Show. Spike Milligan, Harry Seacombe, Peter Sellers and Michael Bentine entertained the nation, including a young Prince Charles.
Well, folks, it's a beautiful day here at Wandsworth Fire Station, folks. The firemen will start their day by unrolling their hoses and watering the flowers. That's all, folks. That's all, folks. Fireman William?
Morning, Chief.
Any outstanding fire calls?
Yeah, well, I've got one here, matey. I'm not too happy about this. He says here, urgent, he says here, Crystal Palace on fire.
A hoax, an absolute hoax, I tell you. I was up there yesterday morning and there's no such building as Crystal Palace at Crystal Palace. Right, now then. Fire drill! Light the fire and put the kettle on.
Gentlemen, bad news. Jane is on fire.
Another programme that made us smile transferred from the Home service to the Light. It was the Clitheroe Kid, featuring the Variety Club comedian Jimmy Clitheroe in the role of a cheeky schoolboy living with his family at Lilac Avenue in a town in the north of England. Jimmy was already nearly 35 when the programme began.
Here is Jimmy Clitheroe as the Clitheroe Kid, with Peter Sinclair, Patricia Burke, Danny Ross and Diana Day in...
A letter from America for Grandad.
The reporters that came with Uncle Andy's letter. Yes, I'll look at them later, Mother. I want to watch something on the telly in a few minutes.
So do I. New York Crime Squad.
It's a ballet.
Oh, is it a ballet? Can you imagine Lieutenant dancing the darn duck with a district attorney?
I'm talking about the ballet on BBC Two. It's The Sleeping Princess.
You mean she dances in her sleep? Don't tell me she snores in time to the music. Da-da-da-da-da.
One programme that was regarded either as a beautiful, easy listening escape or a dreaded programme with its signature tune signalling the end of the weekend was Sing Something Simple. Songs simply sung for song lovers, according to the Radio Times. Cliff Adams assembled a 16-strong choir to sing well-known melodies, accompanied by accordionist Jack Emblow. Sing Something Simple was intended just to run for 6 weeks during the summer, but in fact ran for 42 years.
The BBC invites you to
sing something simple as cares go by. Sing something simple, just you and I. We'll sing the old songs like you used to do. We'll sing something simple for you something for you.
My first broadcast on the Light programme was in December 1962, standing in for Gay Byrne as the host of The Beat Show. That programme featured the BBC's Northern Dance Orchestra and the beat groups of the day like the Searchers, Swinging Blue Jeans and Wayne Fontana and the Mindbenders. The programme was recorded at the BBC's Playhouse Theatre in Hume, Manchester on a Monday evening and transmitted on the Light programme the following Thursday lunchtime. I was on stage introducing the acts using a lip mic. The audience were mainly teenage girls who adored the beat groups but got a little bit bored when the orchestra played. It was typical BBC compromise, really. The listeners actually wanted record shows, but the BBC was a prolific employer of musicians, many of whom had staff contracts. Most parts of the UK had their own BBC orchestra, and there was a strong lobby to keep music live. I opened the programme with Gay Byrne's usual greeting. It's The Beat Show with Bernard Herrmann and the NDO, the band with the beat that's reet. By 1964, I'd become the regular host of The Beat Show, and this led to hosting other shows from the north of England, like Midday Music Hall and On Stage Scarborough. It was one of those that gave a break to a budding new comedian called Les Dawson. What a thrill to appear on the station that I'd listened to as a boy. Britain was changing quickly at the time in fashion, attitudes and music. Out of the North Sea, a radio revolution was beginning with a flurry of pirate radio stations like Radio Caroline, Radio London, Radio Scotland and Radio 270, all beaming non-stop pop to the nation's new transistor radios. The Light programme tried to keep up and started doing more music shows. But because of the strong lobby to keep music live, few of the programmes confined themselves just to playing records. There were a mixture of records and tapes of performances recorded mainly at the BBC studios in Maida Vale. By that stage, I was invited to host my first programmes from Broadcasting House itself. I remember the excitement of the first time that I walked through the swinging doors of Broadcasting House. In the impressive hallway, I could almost sense the ghosts of the great broadcasters of the past as I walked through and down to the studios in the basement of the building.
Here is the Midnight News, and this is Alvar Liddell reading it.
Working for the BBC at Broadcasting House at last, it was great to meet the stalwarts of the Light programme like Roger Moffat and Bruce Wyndham. Both jovial fellows, and I was surprised to see how much time they spent in the BBC bar before hosting the night shift.
And that brings us to 2 o'clock and our news summary. President Johnson is to make a major speech on Vietnam in about half an hour's time. He's expected to say whether he considers the bombing of the North to be effective or not, and whether it should be stopped. Here at home, 16 pit closures have been postponed at least until the end of the year to ease the unemployment situation.
Roger Moffat told the story of when Frank Sinatra was booked to do some shows in Manchester. The musicians went on strike and the concerts were cancelled. Roger and Sinatra were drinking at Frank's hotel in Manchester. "How is the hotel?" asked Roger. "Lousy," said Frank. "Why don't you come back to my place?" said Roger, and Frank agreed. When they got back to Roger's house at 3 a.m, he realised that he'd forgotten his keys, so he picked up some pebbles and he threw them at the bedroom window to wake up his wife. Eventually the window opened and there was the wife in curlers. "Can I come in, love?" shouted Roger. "I've got Frank Sinatra with me." "I don't care if you've got the Pope with you," said his wife. "You can push off." Or words to that effect. Let's face it, no one turned up at 3 o'clock in the morning with Frank Sinatra. My first shows from Broadcasting House were Swing Into Summer, Swing Along, and Swinging Gently. Well, it was the swinging 60s. We didn't get a regular programme like nowadays. Programmes often had a repertory of presenters doing a week at a time, so you always felt on trial, wondering if you'd be invited back. DJs were required to script their shows, and the scripts had to be vetted by the producer. The first producer I worked with in London was Doreen Davies, who went on to become a big wheel at Radio 1. She was a determined operator with a real love for the glam and glitter of pop. She smoked, drank lots of coffee, and always wore a huge trademark rosette of flowers. In the studio, we would spend the morning doing what were called tops and tails, listening to the end of records and practicing talking over the intro of the next record, what was called the voiceover. Then we would have lunch in the BBC Club before doing the show live in the afternoon. The BBC Club was in the Langham Hotel across the road from Broadcasting House, where there were actually a couple of bedrooms where people hosting early morning shows could stay, ready to run across the road bleary-eyed in the morning. Once I was on air, Doreen would sit in the control room on the other side of a glass window from the studio. If a voiceover went well, you would get a big thumbs up and a great big smile. If you crashed the vocals, which was an arch crime, Doreen would look discreetly at the floor. One producer I worked with was particularly picky. He said to me one day, "I notice you use the expression right now a lot. Are there other ways of saying it, like just now or now? That's a good word, isn't it?" I said, "You don't like right now?" "No." Well, I went through my script and crossed out the word right whenever I saw it, but I remembered that I missed one, and I thought, oh God, I'll never be booked again. We weren't proper DJs. We didn't actually play records. I could see a whole team of people sitting through the glass in the control room. There was a producer, the producer's PA with a stopwatch, timing everything, the studio manager operating all the faders, a grams operator playing records, and a tapes operator. When I wanted a record to play, I didn't do it myself, as in later years. I had to wave to cue it in. And I remember one day waving to the grams operator, who waved back cooey with a cheery smile, but forgot to play the record. The BBC radio producers seemed like gods, almost unsackable, however badly they behaved. There was one exception, a producer who apparently took a holiday in Malta in return for playing a Dorothy Squires record on Family Favourites. He was put on gardening leave. Well, his garden must have been the envy of neighbours because he never came back.
Boom Radio.
For some time now, the BBC has found that jingles do play an important part in wireless programs.
Yeah.
So we've been experimenting with some of our own. We've come up with this one. See what you, the license-paying public, think of it.
This is the BBC Live program.
Very good taste, yes, very good taste. Won't offend anybody.
I'll tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, that's just about it for this week. Next week on the programme, we've got 90 minutes. Not just a half an hour, not just an hour, but 90 minutes. Whoopee! And we'll be playing the whole Beatles LP, as you heard. So don't forget, tune in. Where it's at next Saturday. Yes, at 4 o'clock until 5:30 on the live programme. Until then, from all of us in the studio, which this week included Kenny Everett. Goodbye. Duncan Johnson. Yeah, well, he was there somewhere. And, of course, me, Chris Denny. Till next week at 4 o'clock. Bye-bye, everyone.
By the mid-60s, the BBC was becoming acutely aware of the popularity of the pirate radio stations. They were building huge audiences with their ad-libbing, fast-talking DJs playing the chart records of the day, rather than cover versions by orchestras, which the BBC still relied on, owing to restrictions on needle time. There was one programme which played more proper records on the Light programme. It was called Midday Spin. In the BBC way, different presenters would pop up each day, such as Gay Burns, Steve Race, Don Moss, Simon Deal.
See you next Monday at 12:15 with another touch of your actual midday spin. Goodbye.
Jimmy Young, and in 1966, a young Terry Wogan. As the presenters on the pirate stations started to become household names, several of them, like Pete Brady and Tony Blackburn, were given longer stints on the show.
This afternoon's weather, showery in most places, but there'll be some bright intervals in northern Britain. Another bright interval right now with Tony Blackburn.
Thank you very much, and back to the music with Pink Floyd.
BBC producers realised revolution was in the air and power was about to be handed to the presenters, who would be given regular slots and thus no longer beholden to their whims.
Actually, as it's my first day with the BBC, nobody knows I'm in the building yet, because I thought, as it's my first day, I won't push my luck, so I entered by the tradesman's entrance. This one's going to be a hit. It comes from the Young Rascals. I don't know.
Tony, of course, was one of the pirate broadcasters who'd already transferred to the BBC, and quite a few of those rebels had been secured for short-term contracts. I have to say they caused quite a stir among the Pinstripe Brigade when they started to drop into the BBC Club, which is the private bar next to Broadcasting House. Some of them had long hair and beads and said things like, "Far out, man." In retrospect, the Midday Spin programme itself was used as a tryout for some of the people who would be signed to the new BBC station, planned to replace the pirates. Yet, the end of the BBC Light programme was in the air.
247. Here's news. Starting in September, the BBC begins a new service for fans of popular music. There'll be Light, and then there's Pop, and then there's always... excuse me. This is how Radio 247 will work.
Early potential names for the new pop station included Melody Radio or Radio Elizabeth. But the approved plan, of course, was Radio by Numbers. The light would be dimmed and replaced by Radio 1 and Radio 2. And so, in September 1967, I was one of the people who served to close it down. I hosted the final week of Housewife's Choice, a show that had run on weekday mornings at 9 o'clock since 1946, with its cheery theme tune in the morning. In Party Mood by Jack Strachey, the theme of Housewife's Choice, which was played for the last time on September the 29th, 1967. A melody which summed up a time in history, a time which was about to end. At 10:15 that night, as Friday Night is Music Night ended, I took over with the final edition of Music Through Midnight. I have to say that with Housewife's Choice in the morning and Music Through Midnight at night, on the last day I did feel a bit like an undertaker.
Well, there we end broadcasting in the Light programme, not just for today, but as it seems forever. The Light programme, that is, well, as it's known now, is closing down. But in only a few hours' time, the BBC with Paul Hollingdale will open up on 247 metres and 1500 metres and VHF. That's at 5:30. And then at 7 o'clock on 247 metres, Tony Blackburn will open and swing into our new Radio 1 network. We hope you'll be with us, not only at 5:30, but if you like pop music, as it should be played and should be introduced, in this case with Tony Blackburn, then switch over or switch on to 247 at 7 o'clock. That leaves me with a rather sad time to tell you. It's 3 minutes past 2 o'clock, and Paul will be back and Tony will be on for the very first time in the morning. Roger Moffat at this end, hoping that everything your end will be just as you would like it to be. With the time now at 3.5 minutes past 2, good night to you and good morning.
The next morning, it was a brave new world as Radio 1 and Radio 2 began.
This is BBC Radio 2, the Light programme, and on 1500 metres longwave and VHF, with Radio 1 on 247 metres. Good morning, this is Paul Hollingdale on this opening day of Radio 1 and Radio 2, welcoming you to Breakfast Special, which will be broadcast on the usual Light programme wavelengths up to 7 o'clock. But at 7, well, Breakfast Special continues on Radio 2 on 1500 metres and VHF, and of course Radio 1 on 247 will be breaking away for the first time with the Tony Blackburn Show. Now, if you're still with us then and want Tony Blackburn's Pop Record Show for breakfast, that's 247 metres on medium wave, and that's your Radio 1 tuning spot. And of course, Breakfast Special continues on Radio 2. At 8:30, Radio 2 will join Radio 1 and Leslie Crowther for Junior Choice. Well, actually, that's children's favourites under a new name.
So, it was goodbye to the Light programme where I did my first radio broadcast in the UK, and for many of us, the radio station that we grew up with. The world had moved on, but it left us with loads of wonderful childhood memories.
Well, that's about all from Music Through Midnight for tonight. Next Friday night we'll be on the air a little earlier than the last few weeks at 10:15 with a full 2 3/4 hours of music, and I do hope that you'll try and join me then. Until then, on behalf of producer Paul Williams and Mike and Mike, or Michael and Michael in the control room, this is David Hamilton wishing you all listening at this early hour a very good night, and of course a very special good night to you.